and welcome to tonight's edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your co-host, Kahari Mosley, here with my illustrious co-host and co-pilot on our Monday night missions, Miracle Jones, Esquire. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Kahari. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. It's another Monday night, another manic Monday. Got a big week coming up. We got Netroots in town. And we were inching closer to fall and Labor Day and back on the campaign trail. So we're going to be starting off our candidate forum series at the end of September. So we still got a little bit of time before we get back to the candidate forums, but a lot more politics in the coming weeks here on the Power Hour, but not yet. We're still going to enjoy the summer. And so Miracle, tell us before we get into the news of the day, what do folks have in store for tonight?
So today we're very blessed. We have two amazing guests to talk to you about some of the ways that communities are responding to things that are happening. Our first guest is Lee from New Voices for Reproductive Justice. We're going to talk about how things are happening here in Pennsylvania since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And then our second guest, Billie from Community Pittsburgh, is going to talk about some cool ways that people are fighting back against gentrification, making sure that they're able to stabilize housing in their communities, how they're able to look up not only price lists, but help neighbors who've fallen behind due to taxes. So some really cool initiatives that are happening with housing stability within this region. And so we have a really great program for you this evening. But like Hari said, it's a Monday, which means we're back in the world of politics. And unfortunately, Pennsylvania, coup d'etat, we're in the middle of a very contentious election cycle. But like Kahari said, we have Netroots and a bunch of other events coming to Pittsburgh. So people from all of the major parties are going to be in Pittsburgh this weekend for a variety of rallies. So please expect to see Pennsylvania on your news, Pittsburgh on your screens all weekend, from the Senate campaigns all the way down to the gubernatorial this weekend. So back to you, Kahari.
Thank you for that, Miracle. Yeah, and there's so much going on in the political world, starting with national news and the news that's pretty much been everywhere. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has raided former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago, Florida home for about 11 documents of different levels of classification that were not permitted to be taken from the White House. So there's an ongoing investigation. There's, I believe, 3 potential charges that have been discussed: the Espionage Act, as well as obstruction and improper removal of basically national secrets, national security information. So this is a lot of information that's come out in the last few days. I understand that Attorney General Merrick Garland weighed this for many, many weeks. This was not a decision that came very hasty. There was a lot of thought, put into the ramifications of it. And I heard that also a message was sent to the Attorney General from former President Trump, almost some sort of a warning or almost some sort of a threat, some believe. So I think this part of the story is just getting started. And along with news around former President Trump, one of his biggest foes, Congresswoman Liz Cheney out of Wyoming, is up for a primary election tomorrow. Many believe that she will not be successful. Many believe that she's going to lose the Republican primary in the state of Wyoming, running against a candidate former President Trump has endorsed, Harriet Hageman. And all eyes will be on Wyoming this time tomorrow night to see if Liz Cheney somehow survives a tough primary. But many believe if she does lose this primary, as many believe she will then begin to plan the 2024 presidential campaign. Some say not to win, but to really ensure that former President Trump never wins the mantle a Republican nominee for president, particularly in 2024, but never again 2028, 2032. You can name the year. I think Liz Cheney is not going to be a supporter of former President Trump ever again. So it's going to be very interesting to see what will be the aftermath of this race in the state of Wyoming with Liz Cheney, and then what she will do next if she does lose. Many believe it'll be a 2024 presidential race. So back to you, Miracle.
Yes, and keeping in line with like Wyoming, also the state of Utah is having a very interesting Senate primary as well. One of their leading challengers isn't even a Democrat, it's an independent who has gained caucusing with Dems because he is trying to overturn another Trump ally in the Utah Senate. So what we're really going to be seeing in these next couple of weeks with these last few primary challenges is still a referendum on the last presidential administration. As we head into November, there's been a conversation about the dialogue and the messaging coming from both of the major parties, but what does it mean to run a race right now? How are we getting down ballot races? How are we funding races? And also, how are we getting people excited about the polls when there is so much misinformation, disinformation around elections? And so between now and November, unfortunately, please remember that you're going to be inundated a little bit with some federal messaging and ads, as these are some of the most expensive races that we're seeing in U.S. history. Again, for a recap for some of our viewers, Citizens United a few years ago changed the way money is able to be engaged in politics. And so some places have like unlimited spending. And so you're seeing a lot of corporations back candidates, but you're also seeing a lot of individuals spend millions upon millions of dollars to finance their own candidacies. And so it's going to be a very interesting election year. One of the strangest, election years. A lot of people are forecasting, again, with Roe v. Wade being one of the leading issues that are mobilizing people around voting, particularly because of Justice Thomas's opinion, where he basically said that the right to birth control, some of the rights to privacy under same-sex marriage and same-sex adult encounters should be changed. And so a lot of people who may have not traditionally been engaged in the political sphere are now mobilizing. So it's a lot happening. But again, all politics is local. So there's a lot of stuff happening national, but things are happening here locally. And one of the biggest stories here locally is, of course, over the weekend, it was announced that there was another death at the Allegheny County Jail. And this is in the midst of a national conversation about reimagining public safety and reimagining cities without jails. In New York, there's the Close Rikers movement. In Atlanta, there is the Close the Jail ATL. In New Orleans, they closed. They're advocating to close one of their local jails. In St. Louis, they closed the workhouse. And so there is this ongoing national conversation about how to engage public safety when it comes to incarceration, because jails are so costly, so violent, and so egregious as human rights conditions and offenders. And so unfortunately, Allegheny County Jail locally here is no exception. And there was an announcement that the jail will be put on oversight, but a national organization is going to come over and look and see if there's anything that can happen to make the jail safer. Again, this is the ongoing campaign where hundreds of people are showing up, online and in person to the Allegheny County Jail Oversight Board demanding changes, and this is nothing that is new. And when we're talking about elections, also there's a big conversation last week here in Allegheny County as the Board of Elections announced that they would not be doing satellite boxes and they would not be doing satellite sites as we are going into this next general election. So in Allegheny County, people will only be able to drop their ballot off at the Board of Elections downtown on Ross Street or in the mail if they're not able to vote in person. And again, there's a lot of stuff happening nationally and locally. And I know Kahari has some more things to talk about.
Thank you, Miracle. I did want to lift up that the Democrats just passed a major piece of legislation. It is called the Inflation Reduction Act. Sorry about that. The Inflation Reduction Act was passed in Congress. It was passed by a 51-50 vote in the Senate, meaning Vice President Kamala Harris broke the tie in the Senate. But some of the things that it addresses, it tackles climate change. More than $300 billion will be invested in energy and climate reform, the largest federal clean energy investment in U.S. history. The bill has support of many environmental and climate activists, though it fell short of the $550 billion allotment that the Democrats initially called for. It also lowers the cost of prescription drugs. It makes prescription drugs more affordable, but there is some limits. The bill does include a historic measure that allows the federal health secretary to negotiate the prices of certain expensive drugs each year for Medicare, but the bill won't impact every prescription drug or every patient, and it won't take effect quickly. The negotiations will affect 10 specific drugs covered by Medicare in 2026, increasing to 20 drugs in 2029. And then finally, in the area of tax reform, the Inflation Reduction Act also creates a 15% minimum tax for corporations making $1 billion or more in income or bringing in more than $300 billion in revenue. And many folks have said this has been the biggest legislative achievement since the COVID relief bills that were passed early in the Biden administration. And poll numbers seem to be going up for President Biden. And this does seem to be the best month that President Biden probably has had since his first couple months in office in early 2021. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to lift that up. That's a major, major piece of legislation they're looking at in September. You're going to start to see a lot more information about this, a full rollout with the Democratic Party really trying to take ownership over this legislative victory and really try to lift up the benefits that everyday Americans will get once these new reforms get implemented. Back to you, Miracle.
Yes, and so there's been a whole lot of conversation about what does it mean for people to get involved in the political process, and a lot of people have talked about how it's been Senator Schumer who has really been mobilized by a lot of the protests over the past couple of years, and has been actually able to get a caucus to have some of this legislation passed, whereas in the past he was more of a moderate, very by the book. But because of some of the protests and the changes and the conversation about legacy and what people are leaving behind has been really going out there, becoming more progressive, taking public stances on issues that he probably would not have done a couple of years ago. So it's been very interesting to see. And as we move into this this recess where people are going to be hitting the ground, getting ready for the Labor Day relaunch of the campaigns, it's going to be very interesting seeing what other legislation comes down and how people are going to be able to spend this on this very, very contentious campaign trail. But we have a very good program, and before we go there, I'll let Kahari wrap up with our current news.
Thank you, Miracle. And just to round out some of the things that are happening, here in the state. John Fetterman returned to the campaign trail on August 12th, I believe, in Erie, Pennsylvania. So it appears that that John Fetterman is in the process of recovering from the stroke he suffered in the days leading up to the primary election. Has now taken some time off. It looks like almost close to 3 months, and now is back on the campaign trail. Ready, for the closing stretch. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Very interesting poll came back from a PA10 with that is the race out in the Lancaster area, where you have Shemaine Daniels, African American woman, the Democratic nominee, is running against Scott Perry. Scott Perry, has been implicated in the activities of January 6th. And it is said to even had asked for a pardon in the days after that. And it shows that at least there's a recent poll that shows that Shemaine Daniels has a 44-41 percent advantage over Scott Perry in the 10th congressional district. If she were to win, and Summer Lee to win, they would be the first two African American women ever elected to Congress in the state of Pennsylvania. So again, it's a very, very, very interesting political cycle. And that's one race that, even though it's on the other side of the state, we'll be taking a close look at. This Shemaine Daniels Scott Perry race in central Pennsylvania is going to probably continue to be one of the most closely watched congressional elections, not only here in Pennsylvania, but around the country. Back to you, Miracle.
And talking about elections and the fallout and elections having consequences, we know that the biggest consequence of the last election was that there was a change in the makeup of the Supreme Court, which resulted in the Dobbs decision that basically found that Roe v. Wade was unconstitutional. And since that time, there has been changes all across the U.S. when it comes to reproductive justice and reproductive access. And to talk a little bit about what that has meant so far for people here in Pennsylvania, please welcome from New Voices for Reproductive Justice, Lee, who's going to just talk a little bit about the current state of abortion access here in Pennsylvania. Welcome to the Power Hour.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miracle. Thank you so much, Clark, for having me and for having New Voices tonight.
Of course. Just to get started, can you just talk a little bit about New Voices? Who are you, and what is this term reproductive justice? Because I think sometimes this is maybe the first time people are hearing that.
Absolutely. New Voices, we here at New Voices, we're a nonprofit. We are the only one of its kind, the first of its kind in Cleveland to be here to advocate for those Black women, gender expansive people, femmes, for the needs of them. Our mission at New Voices for Reproductive Justice is dedicated to transforming society for holistic health and well-being, like I said, for Black girls, women, and gender expansive people nationally, as well as in Pennsylvania and Ohio. We help to dismantle patriarchal anti-Blackness using tools such as community organizing, leadership development, as well as voter engagement. And regarding reproductive justice within itself, it is a term that sometimes is confused with things like reproductive rights. But reproductive justice is our guiding framework. It's an innovative, radical movement designed specifically to engage Black, marginalized by gender in local, national, and global movement building for radical justice, gender justice, and as well as environmental justice.
Thank you. And can you unpack a little bit why it's important to differentiate between the verbiage of reproductive rights and reproductive justice?
Absolutely. I made that distinction because reproductive justice encompasses, like I said, about the Black marginalized communities. Reproductive rights was not inclusive of womb having persons that were Black. The transgender, the LGBTQ community, none of those people were included in reproductive rights in the way that we approached it, the way that it was broken down. But reproductive justice became the answer to that.
Thank you so much. And can you just talk a little bit? What is the state of reproductive right now in Pennsylvania? I know stuff is changing literally day by day, but what is the landscape right now?
Well, honestly, Miracle, this overturning of Roe v. Wade is really taking precedent in the minds of many people. And, when people ask about the state of abortion or healthcare right now, speaking on behalf of New Voices, you know, our commitment and our convictions remain the same no matter the landscape. But Black birthing individuals will be the ones affected, continually affected by restricting things like abortion access the most. This on top of everyday violence that Black people are involved in or engaged with or are faced with, already sanctions against Black women, birthing individuals, men, and their families. And this is happening by state. And this type of restriction gives us, we no longer have access to adequate health care, adequate housing, equity in the communities with clean air, clean water, and access to family planning. I think it's also worth saying that people with the capacity for pregnancy are in a fight for their bodily autonomy every single day and their right to create families in the way that aligns with their needs. I think that's what's important to note about reproductive justice, is that we want to be able to create and raise our families in ways that we see fit. Or if I see as a Black woman that I don't want to have a family or raise a family, that is my right. So these are things that are being infringed upon. So the current state of abortion access right now, while people think because Roe v. Wade turned over and announced, no, we've always been in a place where legislation has tried to tell us what we can do with our body. So the current state is still bumpy. It's as bumpy as it was before, and it's still still a fight that has to happen. But the restrictions are obvious, and I think that's what's drawing most attention right now.
Thank you for that. Can you talk a little bit about, in the wake of the recent decisions and the current political landscape, what is the work that New Voices is doing right now, and what are some of the current campaigns that you're involved in?
Well, currently under our Voice Your Vote program, which is our integrated voter engagement program, we are operating in Philadelphia as well as in Cleveland. And our goal right now is to engage Black women, femmes, and birthing individual persons ages 18 to 49. That's our target audience. But our goal is to not only engage them in learning what the importance of voting is, but also to teach them another lesson, that voting is just a tool. It's not the end all. It's not an overall panacea. It's just a tool. But we want to build some excitement around them taking playing part in what is to happen, not only to everybody, but specifically to our Black counterparts, to the communities that I'm engaged with. So with our Voice Your Vote program, we're definitely pushing people to the polls. Get out and vote. We have our community organizing and engagement department, which is working in the areas of leadership development, which is another campaign that we are currently really strong about, building leaders and exposing people to these topics under reproductive justice. We also are working in the area of environmental justice, because we know that there's a lot of intersectionality there in just lifting up the voices of our Black women and femmes and gender expansive persons, lifting their voices and bringing attention to what they're doing for the environment as it affects our reproductive rights and reproductive justice.
Thank you for that. And here in Pennsylvania, there's still this ongoing conversation around maternal mortality, which is the rate of which people die in pregnancy-related death within the first 2 years after a pregnancy experience. And that we talked earlier about reproductive justice, having healthy pregnancies and healthy journeys. Is there some information or campaigns that New Voices is doing in this arena?
We are very active in Black maternal health as it pertains to our function at collaborative tables and coalitions. And we are aware of the bills and policies that are being passed that touch on Black maternal health and Black families. What I can encourage people to do is to connect with new voices. I mean, the facts are astounding. I was doing some research the other day and looking at non-Hispanic Black women versus non-Hispanic white women and the maternal mortality rate. I believe the Black mortality rate is 2.9 times higher than that of non-Hispanic white women. So these facts, I hope it is driving people to connect with organizations, to donate, to we have the Say Her Name Justice Fund that is happening right now at New Voices that people can donate to or can connect with if they are in need. It is serving Black women and gender expansive persons in the greater Philadelphia and greater Cleveland and greater Pittsburgh area. And we're able to help those women that are being affected by not being able to access anything in the continuum of healthcare, ideally, of course, right now, abortion. So we're able to provide funds up to $1,000 to, those persons. We're not asking a lot of information. We just want to help. So for people that want to get involved in the Black maternal health fight, that is one way they can do it. Connect with New Voices, connect with our Say Her Name Justice Fund, donate, volunteer your time. The list is endless, but those are a couple of the things that came to the top of my mind just now.
Mm-hmm. And so we know there's been a lot of litigation as well. So how has that how has that, if at all, impact the work that you and New Voices are doing?
Litigations in regards to, you're talking about around abortion access? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So we are very present in the policy front, staying on top of and aware of litigation, staying on top of and aware of current happenings, people that are on the ballot, not just people, but topics that are on the ballot. We're very engaged in that arena. And policy informs everything that we do. So litigations directly affect us because it's how we're able to educate the community around us. It's how we stay informed, and it directs our movement in regards to the fight for equity.
And before you go, can you talk a little bit, because we talk a lot about what happens in Pennsylvania, but can you give us, a quick rundown on the political landscape in Ohio right now and, what's at stake? We do get a little bit of the Ryan J.D. Vance race, because, Ryan is like right out of Youngstown, so it's right over the border. But what's happening, in the state of Ohio? Because I always find it interesting, when I first came into politics in the late 90s, early 2000s, Pennsylvania and Ohio were almost looked at as twins, kind of the two twins that are connected. As one state goes, the other state goes. Maybe Ohio's just a little bit more conservative, but not much. But it seems like over the last, several political cycles, Pennsylvania, even though in 2016, Pennsylvania went red, but by and large, since 2000, Pennsylvania, has kind of gone more progressive, quote unquote, and Ohio has gone more conservative. Is that a fair estimation? And what, is going on politically, in the state of Ohio that folks outside of the state of Ohio need to be paying attention to?
I can't speak to how fair that estimation is, but it sounds pretty close, Kari. Me learning the landscape in Ohio, which I am doing every single day, I'm just astonished by just the state, number one, of the access to abortion or using abortion as healthcare. In the state of Ohio, I know that they've enacted the heartbeat bill, which says that a birthing individual cannot receive abortion as healthcare after, I believe, 6 weeks of being pregnant. And most people don't even know that they're pregnant by that time. So we've already cut that out. We know that it's not a friendly landscape, like you say, for progressives right now. And it's really a lot of things that are happening in Ohio, like voter purging. My team always keeps me abreast of the fact that if you haven't voted in the previous primary election, that your information is purged. So then you go to vote and you're not even registered when you didn't know. So those are a couple of things that are happening right now in Ohio. And I would say that they're becoming more and more increasingly more stringent and strict in the way in which they deal with our communities.
All right, we said it was going to be a painless conversation, and it was. And so I do thank you so very much for joining us. Before you go, can you just talk about how people can get in contact with New Voices?
Absolutely. We would love to hear from those that are interested in engaging with us, working with us, volunteering, donating. You can definitely look us up on our website, www.newvoicesrj.org. That's www.newvoicesrj.org. And from our website, you'll be able to have access to all of our programming, all of our donation links, all of our streams. You can definitely use that website to contact with our executive leadership or our organizers on the ground. You use the website as a tool, use it as a key, open the door and come in, and let's see how we can work together.
All right. Well, we hope you have a blessed rest of your Monday evening. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys have a wonderful night.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
And so, talking about access to healthcare, one of the main ways people need access to healthcare is having access to a home, access to a stable structure. And our next guest has spent years advocating for affordable housing, but just recently created a community initiative called Common Unity Pittsburgh that's aimed at educating people about not only the home ownership process, but how to find investment properties, how to look up listing in the people's own neighborhoods to stop and push back gentrification and unfair housing practices. And so our next guest is the executive director of Common Unity Pittsburgh. Please welcome to the Power Hour, Billie Vaughn.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good.
Good evening. For joining us.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. Can y'all hear me?
I said welcome. Yeah,
Oh,
we can hear you. Yeah, I said welcome and thank you for joining us this evening.
thank you for having me. Thank you.
And so you were in a business that a lot of people wouldn't think, to start looking, especially coming off of the pandemic. Can you just talk a little bit about what led you to start looking at real estate, especially in local underserved communities?
Yes. So the main purpose and the vision for Common Unity is to establish generational wealth through ownership. And one of our services is Value the Vacant, where we teach community stakeholders, community members how to purchase property through the public sector of public auctions. So a lot of people aren't aware of the process to purchase these properties in the public sector of our local municipality and our local government. So just being someone who started out working for the city and just seeing the gap of the education on just this public benefit, it just made me want to step out and start teaching community members how to purchase this property.
Thank you for that. And could you talk a little bit, given that background, what made you, really make the connections? You're working for the city. You're seeing the role that the city is playing. You're seeing how the community is affecting. What was kind of, the light bulb moment for you, that says, okay, like, I'm serving the people, in the public sector, but maybe I need to go into a different spot within the space to provide, more for the community. What kind of made you come to that epiphany?
Really just, seeing the auctions at first. And I would see how many people were there. So, when we're talking about auctions, a lot of our community members are already aware of like the sheriff sales, which is like mortgage foreclosure auctions. But a lot of community members didn't know anything about the city auctions, which is like tax delinquent properties. And I would see the same, I want to say back in 2017, the same 4 people come into these auctions. And I would sit and say like, why aren't people coming to these auctions? And I would try to work with the city and the department I worked in to try to do some public engagement. And at the time, I was just like too passionate about the ideas to try to start that. So it kind of just made me realize I can bridge out and start doing outreach on my own to the community on not just purchasing this property, but I also help people redeem it too. So there's been cases of someone not knowing a property, that's been in their family lineage is going through the auction, and I've helped them get their property taken out of the auction also.
And can you just talk a little bit more about that process? I think that a lot of people don't know that when you purchase the property, you have your mortgage, but then you have to pay taxes to go to the city and the county, and you can basically risk foreclosure by not paying those taxes. Can you just talk a little bit about that? And
Right.
can you talk about how you're helping those community members? Because I think a lot of times people see these auction sales and all they think about is corporate investors coming in and stealing homes from the elderly. Can you just talk about how you're changing that
Yeah.
narrative? I think it's so important.
Yeah, that's definitely a narrative that's not, I don't want to say not true, but that's not what I do. And that's not what I represent. So when you think about auctions, some auction is where, a certain entity could auction off property, something of value for something that's not paid, right? So mortgage foreclosures are sheriff sale, which is the county. And then you have certain cities that are in like second class cities where the treasurer is able to hold an auction to collect on unpaid real estate taxes. So most of these properties that are in the treasure sale, and that's what I teach, is these are properties that do not have mortgages attached, properties that have been sitting. When you see all these vacant houses and you see, all the blighted neighborhoods, the blighted properties in our neighborhoods, most of those just have delinquent taxes on those and no mortgages. If there was a mortgage, they would probably go through the sheriff's sale, but most of them are just tax delinquent properties. So in order for the city to, be able to collect on those taxes or to even transfer ownership, there has to be an auction. So what happens is, they'll put these properties in an auction where if you are interested in buying it, you are just paying the unpaid real estate taxes. And that's the difference between a treasure sale and a sheriff sale. So what I do is mainly like solely treasure sale where it's just unpaid taxes. And 90% of the owners on these vacant properties are deceased or they abandoned their properties. And so we're not really dealing with like people, losing their homes to foreclosed properties, but there is a redemption period if that is the case. And with these auctions, yes, it's open to the public. So, right now we are dealing with bidding up against, investors. But what's coming to the future of the land bank is the land bank has the power to pull these properties out of the auction for us community members. So we won't have to bid up against these investors. And that's something that the land bank is working on eventually.
Could you share like one of the more inspiring stories that you have and all the work that you've done? Obviously this is something that you haven't started. You've been doing this for a number of years, but is there one story you can pull from that really is very inspirational and kind of lays it out on why you do this work and why other people should tune in and pay attention to this because, who knows how their lives could be transformed, by this incredible work that you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I can name a couple, but two that stand out. One for the redemption side, right? So redemption is redeeming your property. And I think the last auction, which was about last year, because we skipped the one in April. This auction happens 3 times a year. So last year, I posted a daycare that was in the auction, and the starting bid is always just what taxes are owed to the city, county, school. So I think the starting bid was like 1,500, and I posted the daycare, and a girl reached out to me and she said, "Hey, that's my grandma's daycare," And I said, "Well, really? Did you?" It's in the auction that's coming up, this Friday, and she didn't have any clue, and she said her uncle had taken over the property and he hasn't been doing good, and she asked me, and from an investor mindset, which I really don't have because I'm so passionate, but someone with an investor mindset, they wouldn't think to, help her get this property out of the auction. It would be, listen, this is open to the public on Friday. It's 1,500. I'm interested in it. It is what it is. But I took the time to tell her, hey, you actually have up until Thursday to make a payment plan. And if you just make a payment plan, not even a full 1,500, you go and make a payment plan, they will take that property out of the auction. So she was so happy. She thanked me, and then she ended up calling me back and said, we got to keep the property and it's been taken out of the auction. So that's one of the redemption side of it that I feel like sometimes the community, we just don't know those loopholes or what's connected to these auctions that happen, and being able to keep your property. And then another inspiration of it is just being able to teach people who are born and raised from these communities how to stay, and how to add value with just becoming homeowners. I mean, we think that this is something that is so far out from passion, but if you go to some of these auctions and you see, I've seen someone bid up against a grandmother whose property was in an auction. He bid up against her, he won, and he turned around and gave her the slip to go get her property back, So, and I'm even teaching where sometimes it works, where if you are in a financial situation where you can afford these delinquent real estate taxes, and maybe you're someone who cannot, but you're up against your property being taken, that's an opportunity for collaboration for a new generation of homeowners. New generation of landlords. And maybe that landlord, you could work something out where you could stay and just rent from this person who just bought your property. So there's ways where we can stay and our identity is, safe in our communities, and we're not being pushed out from investors. And then there's ways where, we can create some new opportunities with the investors. It's not always, it doesn't always have to be us against them, because at the same time of them investing into our communities, they need us just as much as we need them. Because as long as there is crime and all of that, what happens to their property value? So we need to work together where you're not erasing our identity, you're not taking away from us, and you are able to be an ally, whether it's through a financial or you're investing in these new rehabs on these homes. So, there's been a lot of stories where I feel like this is just something the public needs to get involved in. And I feel like it's a lot of civic work too. We don't know. It's connected to a lot of the political realm also, because what happens in these process of buying these properties, everything is approved by city council. So if you don't know your city council and you don't know who they are, it kind of leads you in a situation where you don't even know why your property wasn't approved. So there's a lot of civic education around it also.
And you talk about education. One of the ways that you've been engaging folks is through like your TikTok and your social media, and you've been very, intentional about making sure the information you put out, anyone can understand it. What was your thought process behind that? Because I could imagine if I'm someone who woke up to a notice on my door saying my property it is being taken away from me, I wouldn't know where to look, right? And so now people know to look to you. So what made you utilize that journey and say, this is knowledge that I'm going to give away, not only for free, but through social media, and walk you through the process?
Yeah. Just wanting people to know that this is out there, and really to just get us engaged in a different sector, because right now the private sector is based on equity, and it's based on money, and it's based on credit scores. So it's not a fair game in that sector. But public, it's really just based on knowledge, So this stuff is um, it's in journals, and it's online, and it's free. So it's for the community. And a lot of times the community is just not involved because they think it's so far out of their reach. So I just wanted to be that connector to show them, this applies to you, and it's something that you can do. It's not too far over your head. And it's a process. There's always a process, but a process does not mean it's hard. It just means there's steps to get it done. So, and having friends and having family who went through the process of their property, going through the auction, and me just being able to help them, it helped me realize that, this is something that is probably happening everywhere. And even on my TikTok, it's funny because I'm doing the properties in Pittsburgh, because I'm in Pittsburgh, and everyone on TikTok is like, I want to come to Pittsburgh to invest. And I'm like, well, you have an auction right there in your local municipality, local county building too. So now I'm, teaching other counties and people, other community stakeholders, how to purchase property in their county, So it's not just come to Pittsburgh. We don't want you coming and trying to flip up our city. You can, buy a property in your city, and you don't have to go through the worries of, my credit score not being where it needs to be for a mortgage. You can get a property from the auction. And another thing with these auctions, once it happens at the auction level where, the people aren't bidding, in reality, just like this upcoming auction, 98 properties are not going to be purchased at the auction. So there's a process of the surplus, what's left from these properties, that are then sold privately with the municipality. And that's where it's called like a repository list, or we call it just city-owned properties, where then a community stakeholder, someone like me and you, can now just enter into a private sale with the city. And that's where the 3,000 properties that are left, those are properties that, weren't redeemed from previous owners or purchased at the actual live auction. Now this is what's left, and you can buy these properties from the city at a cheaper price than going through the private market. So just having all these benefits of, just our local government. I just feel like this is information that we need to know. And sometimes, when you have a service, I like to say it's like it's our job to get it to the people. If it's something that's benefit for them, then you got to get it to them. People shouldn't really have to go out to look for it. But I'm just trying to be the connector in that piece.
Okay, and I know that was a lot of information that you gave away for free. So I think that's really sparked. But you have a class coming up on Thursday. We have the link in the chat. Can you just talk about the classes that you're having and why you're doing this?
Yep. So the webinar is an online webinar, August 18th, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. You can register on Eventbrite. And in the online webinar, I'm teaching step-by-step the basics of how to purchase property through the auction. The auction would be that Friday, the next day, which is August 19th. So in the webinar, I'm teaching, you have to register because it's online. So we go over how to register. We go over the list. We go over how to look up the property. We go over what happens to the property when it's not sold, and then how to buy the property that's not sold. So we do all of that in a 2-hour webinar. And yeah, we just learn how to purchase a property. And then it's very basic information. So you can apply what you learn from my workshop to another county, because the information is like basic for, just a treasure sale auction anywhere.
And before you leave, you talk if this is the case, if there's any particular, parts of the city that are seeing more activity, in this auction arena, and if any particular neighborhoods folks should have an eye out for, or if they have family or they own some property in that community, should they be that much more vigilant about paying attention to these auctions and how this process works?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would just say always start within your family lineage of what, for generational wealth, because a lot of these properties are vacant. The owners are, deceased. So you can start with going to probate and wills downtown to see the if there was a will, to see who the heirs were on the property, because you might have some ownership tied to it where you could, recover that property before the auction. So I like to tell people to look at that first, because if that's the case, you could redeem it and have it taken out of the auction before that even happens. And just as far as areas, there's, if on the list, the auction list for Friday, there's 98 properties, and there's literally properties in every single like urban community. And unfortunate what's happening with outside investors, they're focusing on the main of, that whole transportation bus line. So East Liberty, Homewood, Lawrenceville. But what's to come through the land bank, I really look forward to the land bank working with community members to, it's called a trunk bid, and that's the name of it. What will happen is you would contact the land bank and say, hey, and I think you have to do it 2 weeks ahead of time. You would contact them and say, hey, I don't feel comfortable bidding in this bid, because sometimes it's a lose-lose with investors. So I don't feel comfortable. Can you pull this property out, because I want to purchase this for, home ownership for my family, and they will pull that out. So there's not really like a main area where I would say it's better. I want us to get involved and get these properties. And if you already are a private home owner, I know the numbers look crazy of what these investors are offering you, but don't sell. Nah, I know I'm just playing, but just keep in mind generational wealth when you're thinking about your home and what you can do with it. And I think that's another education piece that people have to have on equity, how far equity goes on a home, what you can do with the equity in your house, before you sell it to an investor. So it's a lot in the just learning, but it is something that could be taught, because I learned it, so everyone else can learn it too.
All right, Billie, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Can you just tell us how to get in contact with Community Pittsburgh?
Yes, so you can email at info@commonunitypgh.com. I also have the Value the Vacant website up, www.valuethevacant.com, where you could book for consultation. You could book for the webinar, and you could also donate to the work that I'm doing. And yep, that's it. So info@commonunitypgh and www.valuethevacant.com.
Perfect. Well, Billie, thank you so much. And I
Thank
hope
you.
you enjoy the rest of your Monday
You
evening.
too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right. See ya.
Mhm.
And that was Billie Vaughn from Common Unity. And we were also joined by Lee Smith of New Voices for Reproductive Rights. And it's been a very, very engaging conversation about very important, rights when it comes, to reproductive rights and everything that's happened this year. And obviously affordable housing. And housing has been a growing issue in this city as the cost and the price of property has increased astronomically over the last decade.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to uplift the work that Billie's doing is she's taken a lot of these practices people have traditionally seen as very predatory and has been using them to not only inform community members, but help community members disrupt some of these cycles of poverty, fight back against gentrification, and when need be, could create collaborations so people are able to not only stay within their homes, but stay within community, which is something that's very important. And so that's why, we had her on. The information, it's verified, so it's not like a scam. And so the information that's out there, a lot of times people don't know some of these steps. And again, it's stressful, it's challenging, and it's embarrassing. And sometimes people are at risk of losing their properties. But just knowing that you're able to make a payment plan to save your property, I think that's such a necessary information and a necessary tool. Again, there are no easy answers. There are no perfect solutions. We wanted to just make people aware of some of the things that are happening, particularly within Pittsburgh, as Kari was saying, where housing and affordable housing is such a pressing issue. And so we're very excited and thankful for our guests. And like Kari mentioned at the top of the hour, there's so much happening within the city. So first up, Netroots. Netroots is this weekend. If you are a local resident, you are eligible to purchase tickets. So put the link in the chat. You're eligible for up to 40% off some of the tickets. We know the tickets are expensive for some people, and we'll know there are applications out here for people to get involved, not only to volunteer for scholarships, but also to participate. So the first link we'll put in the chat is the Netroots conference where you can go and participate. The next thing we have is, I think maybe Kahari will talk about the Bun B mixer that we have coming up, and I know we'll pull up the ad while we do that.
Yeah, so next Thursday, we will be joined by hip hop legend Bun B from the group UGK, who will be sharing insight and wisdom about entrepreneurship, about the music business, about life in general, about loss. Obviously, rest in peace, Pimp C. He's experienced a lot. Now has the best hamburger in the world, from what I understand. The Trill Burger has won every award that's out there. So has a real interesting perspective, representing the South, and coming up, at a time, long before today, when the South, was not considered, a hotbed for real hip hop, and he was part of that movement, coming from Texas, to really bring legitimacy to Southern hip hop. Obviously before him, the Ghetto Boys and Outkast and some other groups from other parts of Texas as well as Georgia and some other areas were integral as well. But UGK is truly, one of the forerunners, of Southern hip hop, and then made, the classic Big Pimpin' with Jay-Z, that really opened them up to a northern audience, and really made them national stars, and obviously exposed Jay-Z to a broader Southern audience that he may have not had before that tune came out. So he's been, at the forefront, since the 90s, of the transformation, of hip hop from a regional, art form, to a global movement. So, we're very excited to be able to bring Bun B to the Black Boxes to share, all of his wisdom and all of his experiences as an artist, as an entrepreneur, and as, someone who came up, in Texas and overcame those challenges to become a success. So we're, really excited, for this conversation moderated by Jasiri X.
And then talking about Netroots on Saturday, we are very, very honored and to have a One Hood Media, our 501c3 open house. The open house is actually going to be featuring the fathers of the movement, Michael Brown Sr., Jacob Blake, Uncle Bob, Andrew Joseph Jr., and Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. From 12:30 to 3. That's going to be at the Black Box, on 460 Millwood Ave. We're going to have food. We'll have lunch being provided, vegan and vegetarian options. So this is free and open to all. So please come out Saturday from 12 to 3:30. You get to fellowship, engage, and learn with the fathers of the movement, and just have like a really great chill Saturday evening. Also, like we said, it's an election. You have until October 24th to register to vote for the November 8th election. Reminder, if you're voting by mail, November 1st is going to be your election day, because you need to have your ballot in the mail at least a week in advance to avoid any delays or issues with the mail. So again, thank you so much for tuning in to this, week's edition of the Power Hour. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe on our YouTube channel, and I'll turn it over to Kahari to take us home.
And special thanks again to our guests, Lee Smith and Billie Vaughn, for sharing their insight and the fantastic work that they're doing with New Voices for Reproductive Rights and Common Unity. So definitely check the comment section to find those links to catch up to the fabulous work that they're doing. I want to thank them again, and thank everyone for tuning in this week for another edition of the One Hood Power Hour. We'll be back, next Monday post Netroots as we start to get ready for our fall kickoff. And thanks again, thanks producer John, for always holding us down. And see you next Monday for another edition of the Power Hour. This is Kahari Mosley for my illustrious co-host Miracle Jones. We're signing off, and remember, check out Netroots this week. Check out the fathers of the movement this Saturday at the Black Box. And then next Thursday, check out Bun B at the Black Box. So we got a lot going on. Looking forward to engaging with you the entire fall season as we prepare for another huge election. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you next Monday. Take care. Have a great night.